Hello there, my name is Cooper and I'm the Youth Minister at Wild Street Youth. Our Wild Street Youth looks a little different without us being able to meet together, hey? But fear not, because I have a story to tell you. And today, I'm going to be telling you a true story that has so much to say about the situation that we find ourselves in now with this coronavirus. It's a story about Jesus. It's a story about two different people from what seems to be two different worlds, one at the top and one down at the bottom. But these two people have two very big problems. Let's see what they do about it. One day, Jesus just finished crossing a big lake. He hopped out of his boat and suddenly there was a massive crowd of people gathered all around him. This crowd had heard about Jesus announcing that God's kingdom was near. So, people needed to join his new kingdom and follow him, the new king of everything. He was turning lives around, saving lives. This crowd had heard about Jesus healing people, like this one paralyzed guy who could walk after Jesus healed him. Turning lives around, saving lives. This crowd had heard about Jesus rescuing people from demons that were ruining people's lives. And he actually just came from doing this for a man on the other side of the lake. He turned the man's life around. He saved his life. So the crowd was huge because every single one of them wanted to see Jesus. People would have seen him and yelled to their friends and family, "It's Jesus! He's here! Come, let's quickly go and see him." So the crowd grew and grew. There was an important man who heard about Jesus too. This man was a ruler of the synagogue, a local place of worship, a leader. He would have been a very important person when Jesus was walking around. He would have been like a mix of a politician that people liked, maybe hard to believe, celebrity or an influencer today. His name was Jairus, and Jairus would have been known by heaps of people. Jairus came to Jesus in this big crowd. He wanted to talk to him. So Jairus saw the crowd, he pushed through the people to get to Jesus, he got up to Jesus face to face to talk with him, and he fell down at Jesus' feet. You see, Jairus had a problem, a really big problem. His daughter was sick, not just a little sick, really sick. Jairus said to Jesus, "My little daughter is sick. She's about to die. Jesus, come and lay your hands on her that she will be healed and live." And so, Jesus went right away. Jairus with him, Jesus' disciples too, and the huge crowd with them. But as they were walking there was a woman who heard the amazing things that Jesus did too. If Jairus was well respected, honoured and loved by people, then this woman was the complete opposite. In fact, we don't even know her name. This woman had been bleeding for 12 whole years. 12 years, can you imagine that? She'd seen so many doctors that she'd spent all that she had, and they'd only made it worse and more painful. She would have been the equivalent of a homeless person today. People would have stayed well clear of her. She wouldn't have been able to even worship in the same place as important Jairus at the synagogue. She said to herself, "If I even touch Jesus' clothes, I will be made well." So, in the crowd that was so big now that everyone was pressing against Jesus and each other as he walked to Jairus' house, she came up behind him, through the crowds, reached out her hand to touch his clothes, and she touched Jesus. Straight away, two things happened. First of all, her bleeding stopped and she could feel that she was healed. But secondly, Jesus also straight away knew that some power had gone out from him. So he stopped. He turned around to the part of the crowd that was behind him and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Jesus' closest followers, the disciples, thought that Jesus was crazy. "Jesus, there are so many people pressing against you in this crowd. Everyone's touching you, mate." But Jesus kept looking for who had touched him. The woman, knowing that Jesus had healed her, by her just touching him, was terrified. But she came to Jesus, trembling, and fell down at his feet and told him everything. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your trust in me has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While Jesus was still speaking to the woman, some people from Jairus' house came and said to Jairus, "Jairus, your little daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher any further." But Jesus overheard them, and he said to Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." Then he stopped everyone in the crowd from following him into the house except Jairus, Jairus' wife, and 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. When they all came to Jairus' house, there were people crying loudly, wailing. But Jesus said to them, "Why are you making such a noise? This child is not dead, but sleeping." The people who were crying loudly started laughing at Jesus. But he put them all outside and went into the room where the little girl was with her mum and dad and Jesus' closest followers, Peter, James, and John. Jesus took her by her hand and said, "Little girl, I tell you, get up." And straight away she got up and even began walking around, because she wasn't so little that she couldn't walk. She was 12 years old after all. All the people in the room were speechless. They were amazed at what Jesus had done. But he told them not to tell anyone about how he healed the little girl. But then he told them to get her something to eat. You see, these 2 people couldn't have been further apart in how they lived, right? A respected leader on one hand and his daughter, compared to a woman who was bleeding all the time. People would have stayed well clear from her. She would have been an outcast. Could you believe that the outcast woman was bleeding for as long as the little girl had been alive? 12 whole years? No matter who you are, who your parents are, how much money you have, what school you go to, how much people love you or how much people stay away from you, pain, disease, suffering, death will happen to all of us. It's worth remembering that in this time where a lot of people will be affected by this virus. Maybe some of us won't even know someone who gets it. Maybe we already do know someone who will get it. But death and suffering will come to all of us at some point. No one isn't touched by it. It levels the playing field. But remember the response of people to Jesus. The woman and Jairus, they came to him. They didn't think their problems were too big for him to do something about, or too small that nobody would care. Jesus shows that he cares about both of them, no matter who they were and what their problems were. You see, he was powerful to do something about it, and he cared. And you know what? He still is powerful, and he still cares for people like you and me. You might be really scared about this virus. You might be really lonely, being inside all the time. You might be just bored. You might be worried about your family or your parents. Come to Jesus. He is the King, in control of everything, and he can do something about your problems. And you know what? He promises something even better than protection from disease, viruses, suffering, dying. Jesus promises that by him dying and rising from death, that all people who come to him, like the 2 people in our story today, trusting that Jesus can help them, can know that disease, suffering, dying isn't the final word. Because just like he beat sickness and death in this story, he beat the power of death once for all for those who trust in him. So, all who come to Jesus and trust him will rise from death, like Jesus did on the day when he returns to make everything new. So, come to Jesus. No matter who you are, how big or small you think your problems are, come to Jesus. You can find that true story about Jesus in Mark chapter 5, verse 21 to 43 in your Bible, or you can just look it up online, Mark 5, 21 to 43. Who can you tell this story to? Maybe you could try to memorize it yourself and tell it to a friend over the phone or on a video chat. Maybe you could chat with your friend who sent you the link to this video and chat about Jesus yourself. Maybe you could tell a friend from youth about this video and share it with them. I can't wait to hear how your chats with one another go. See you next week.